Okay, and our last section here in this chapter is titled The Nazi State, Germany 1933 to 1939. And we just learned that the causes of the, or some of the causes of the election of Hitler um, and the Nazi Party to power would put Hitler in power as the leader of the Nazi Party. Um, and now we start with what does he do with that power? And we're going to find out that so we're going to find out here that um, well, during the years, the 6 years after Hitler was elected and before the beginning of World War II, Hitler is going to do a lot of things that well, especially at the beginning, maybe look successful. Is that a possibility? Let me just start though with this idea, and I discussed this in my last lecture, that Hitler claimed that the Germans were descendants of the Aryans, a group of people who spoke an Indo-European language, and that he believed he would create another German empire or Reich. It would be, in fact, the Third Reich. The First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire of the 800s all the way to the 1600s, or it began probably with Charlemagne in the 800s. And the Second Reich was during the years of Bismarck, between the German unification and World War One. The Aryans are actually thought to historically be from northern Iran, southern Armenia, western or eastern Turkey. We don't really know as historians exactly where they were from. They did, in fact, or according to historical backgrounds, archaeological backgrounds, make it in linguistic studies to Eastern Europe, to Greece, and also down to India. But there is no historical evidence that suggests that these people were historically originated in Germany. And Hitler did claim, though, that Germans were from, or were the original peak of this group, and that they were superior to all other, that non-Germans in Germany, specifically superior to Jewish people, who Hitler had professed his hatred to in his book Mein Kampf. When someone did not agree with Hitler, he would use or the Nazi Party, he would use terror tactics against them. The SS was his secret police, and they conducted much of this terrorism. Heinrich Himmler was the leader of the SS, and they would use any means necessary to achieve their goals, including murder and imprisonment in concentration camps or work camps. The SS also believed the Germans were the master race, and they would do whatever it took for their cause. Now, here's where we get into this question of like, well, Hitler had some early success. Here's a chart. It's a graph. I love graphs, maps of the German economy. Okay, starting with the American bailout, the Dawes Plan. Maybe I hope. Of 1925. Their economy is improving. Here is the dip during the Great Depression, and Hitler is able to pull Germany successfully out of the Great Depression. Stalin also, right, is successful economically with the Soviet Union. Both of these men, who are oftentimes talked about in the same sentence, are as murderous dictators, were moderately successful economically. Unemployment in Germany was 6 million in 1932 before the Nazi Party took full control, had been cut in half by 34 and was down to only 500,000 in 1937. Hitler earned a lot of respect for this part of his leadership. He held yearly rallies and events that brought great excitement to Germany. I'm going to actually come back here and show you a few pictures here. This is Hitler. It's colorized. You can see he's doing his Heil Hitler thing that he did. But look at this. This is the one that I say, wow, look at the size of this rally. These are people, folks. This these massive rallies were a big part of Hitler's thing. So he took control of the churches and of schools, and professional groups were formed for civil servants, teachers, farmers, doctors, etc. And my slide doesn't say this, but look, how did he do this, right? How did he do this? How did he get the economy back? And he kind of starts with works projects. Okay, he builds the Autobahn. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Autobahn. It's like this freeway system that's on the outside of the major cities in Germany, and it would later be used to transport war materials where the German people couldn't see what was happening. It's this massive 4-lane highway, which was first of its kind. We did not have our first freeways in the United States until the 1950s. Interesting side note, the 110 freeway from downtown LA to Pasadena was the first freeway in our city. If you've ever traveled on it, you know it's windy. And the most unique part about this freeway, if you've ever drove on it, is the on-ramps, because you go from complete stop to jumping on the freeway like that. I mean, it's right there. It's 100 yards. Versus we know it would take, oftentimes you're talking about much further than that to gain speed and get on the freeway, and our freeways don't curve as much. It's unique. It's interesting. Check it out. Well, Hitler was doing these kind of wide freeways, the Autobahn as it's called, before in the 30s. And interesting side note about the Autobahn, like the fast lane of the Autobahn has no speed limit. It's kind of legendary. You can drive really super fast. Understand though that they're talking about in kilometers per hour. So when it's like, yeah, people go over 100 all the time. Well, yeah, 100 is like 64 miles per hour, so it's not that impressive. But still, because there's no speed limit, it's just like car people oftentimes fantasize about, going really fast on the Autobahn. He also rebuilds the military. And if you remember, the Treaty of Versailles says, you can't have an air force, a navy, an offensive military. There was a bunch of rules put on Germany. 500,000 for the size of its military. I'm not 100%. He breaks these rules. Okay, and he starts rebuilding it. And he does this thing called deficit spending, where he borrows money to rebuild. We in America are big into deficit spending nowadays. Ever since the 80s, it was not common before 1980, and then starting in 1980, then President Ronald Reagan moving all the way up to this $1.9 trillion stimulus bill that's supposed to get us out of this COVID economic mess that was just passed and would potentially be signed by President Biden. We are borrowing money on the backs of our future to help our current economy. Well, that's how Hitler was able to do the Autobahn. That's how Hitler was able to do rebuild his military. Also during this period, there was an outreach program to women and youth. The Nazis believed that the job of women was to have lots of babies that would eventually become German soldiers. They believed that it was the men's jobs to be leaders and warriors. They preached this as part of their propaganda. Propaganda, of course, is kind of like the advertising. This is a piece of German propaganda. This was a poster that you would see around town or put out by the German government. Women, I don't know what that says, but it has to do with women and motherhood and how wonderful this kind of thing. Here's another one about women having babies and being their role in the family. I don't speak German. They thought women couldn't do jobs that included hard labor, so they had encouraged the women who didn't have babies to get jobs in nursing or in social work. A popular slogan, here's a funny one: get a hold of pots and pans and a broom, and sooner you'll find a groom. Encouraging women to be mothers as their role in the Nazi Empire. Hitler also had a program for youth, for children, that prepared them for the future. For boys, that was sports. For academic studies or indoctrination, the belief that the Germans were the superior race. That also meant early military-style training. In 1936, there were about 500,000 members of this youth organization, and parents that refused to allow their child to join would be investigated by the government. You don't want that, so you probably let your kids join. Um, Anti-Semitism. So how did this anti-Semitism, this anti-Jewish um, government supported anti-Semitism? There's different types of anti-Semitism and racism, right? We have individual anti-Semitism and racism where one person hates X group, hates, whatever group it is, Jewish people or whatever. And that's bad, right? But the worst kind of anti-Semitism or racism is when the government supports it, when there are actual laws in place that are racist and or go against one particular group more than the other. That's what the Nazis did. And that's the worst kind of racism, institutionalized or structural racism. Anti-Semitic views have been around in Europe for hundreds of years, but in the 1800s, there have been a lot of laws put in place to try and tamp down on the anti-Semitism. In 1935, a new set of laws passed against Jews, including laws excluding Jews from German citizenship, defining Jews not by their religious point of view, but if they had one single Jewish grandparent, forbidding marriage between Germans and Jews, and saying that Jews had to wear yellow German stars. I have a picture here of Jewish people who were forced to wear German stars as they walked around the city, so everyone would know that they're Jewish and they were inferior, apparently, in their belief system. Here is a interesting chart. Now, look, I always try and be honest with students when I'm personal, when an issue is personal to me. This issue is personal to me because my wife is half Jewish, not by religion, but by blood. Her dad was a Jewish man. And then what that means is that my children are quarter Jewish, and according to Hitler, that's right, they would be put in concentration camps because of their blood, although not to get, my children don't go to synagogue. So they're not practicing Jews, but they didn't matter, right? Here is a poster you might see around town about Jewish people. I believe, and I read up on this, is like, Jewish people, this is all your fault. I don't know how to read German, but I thought that's what it said. And in 1938, on November 9th, there was a violent attack against Jewish businesses called Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. Here's an image from this period. You can find lots of them, where they went around to Jewish businesses, and Jewish people were oftentimes very successful in Germany, and they broke down the glass in the front. They looted them, they burned them, they robbed them, they killed dozens of Jewish people. They arrested and sent many, many Jewish people from Germany or from France or from whatever parts of Germany or whatever areas that they could, not France, but Austria, to Poland, to concentration camps. And after that, even stricter laws were passed against Jewish people, and they encouraged Jewish people to leave Germany. Eventually, they would round up Jewish people and send them to concentration camps or work camps that were located largely in the east, mostly in Poland, where eventually they would decide that they would try and kill every Jewish person that was in that camp and every Jewish person that lived in Europe. Just to kind of add a little bit of a personal note, my stepmother is German, and her mom, who was very nice to me growing up, was part of the Hitler Youth. Actually, her dad was a U.S. soldier who took her mom home after his tour of duty in World War II, married her, and had my stepmom, who's wonderful, who I love. One day, her mom was dying, and I went over there and was saying my goodbyes to her. And I had this girlfriend at the time who was a Jewish girl. And at some point, she decided to tell me how horrible Jewish people were, knowing that my girlfriend at the time was Jewish. Why? Why? Why?